Something I've decided I want to start doing on Mondays after we at least have historic weekends is I want to record a short video talking about metrics from the weekend. So shout out to MTG underscore data on Twitter. I will link this in chat for folks that want to see it. So this pile of information here is based off of the 8 SCG Tour satellites plus their 5K, the Mana Clash Strixhaven historic event, and then the Insight Esports 1K IQ, as well as their 3K double elimination tournament. So this data is all from the publicly available data on MTG Melee, and we can take a peek here at some information about the format as a whole. First things first, what does the breakdown of the format look like? So we have a lot of, the sample size. This sample size is from almost 3,000 matches of Magic. I don't know, do they have a raw deck count here somewhere? I guess we could figure it out. We could tally these up here really quick. I don't think I see a total deck count on here. We can add it up though. 158 plus 135 plus 124 plus 110 plus 105. I could probably do this quicker with the percentages, but I'm pot committed to typing in numbers at this point. 1,300 deck lists. Does that sound right? That's probably about right. 158 is 12%. Yeah, it's about right. Okay, so we look at the 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 2 decks out of 1,300 decks had metrics over. The sample sizes are for number of matches. They're not the total number of decks. I should forward feedback to them to put total number of decks on there. So the top 2 most played decks barely broke 10% of the format, and more importantly, the top 2 most played decks, we look here even past those, the 4 most played decks all had very reasonable win rates. Alka, thanks for the 12-month resub. So to articulate what I think is a reasonable win rate, anything below 56% is about the number that I go, that's probably a little bit too good. But context to these numbers is really important. So let's talk about that. So I say 56%, and you get down in here, and you see we have Orzhov Auras encroaching 56%, and we have Izzet Phoenix above 56%. It's not just the raw number on the percentage that matters. The metagame percentage is also relevant. And why that's important is, as someone who's very plugged into historic, Auras and Izzet Phoenix, neither of these archetypes were being talked about a lot going into this weekend. And non-rotating formats like this often follow kind of cyclical patterns where you look at the previous weekend's results and you go, okay, these are the decks that performed well, so I expect them to be higher representation. So I want to think about them more. Even as I head into the weekends. So Izzet Phoenix, because this archetype wasn't being largely thought about, look at these top decks here as a good example. Izzet Phoenix is the first deck at 5.4%, where this is the first graveyard deck, right? This is like kind of a graveyard deck, but not really. Like, this is like a real graveyard deck. So, for instance, we might see the win rates of something like Phoenix go down heading into next weekend if people prepare more graveyard hate for it. And what I would look for as someone who's looking at metrics is if something like Phoenix, next weekend has closer to a 10% representation and still posts a 58% win rate, that's when you really start thinking, okay, is there an issue here? So you can see here too, this says highlighted matchups are ones with the strongest sample sizes with as much as 10% plus or minus confidence intervals here. So, based on, we talk about even in a sampling like this, where we have almost 3,000 matches, we're still not that confident because of how many variables go into Magic. Because, there's so many decks here, right? Like this other category here at 24% of the field is like a lot of different decks in it. Now, another thing we can look at from these metrics is how do these decks line up into some of these other things potentially. And again, you could see here, these matchup ratings have wider ranges on them because they're smaller sample sizes for them. We don't have that many. How many times did Simic Stompy play Selesnya Company, for example? And we actually just finished playing Simic Stompy, and Selesnya Company felt very bad and difficult to play against because of Lovestruck Beast. And we come here and look at the matrix, and we're like, oh, Simic Stompy's only 38% against this, and I would say to myself, yeah, that probably sounds about right. Yeah. Another thing to point out here that's probably good to note is you could look at how Phoenix did against some of the field, and you can see Phoenix has only, okay-ish win rates, or even marginally bad against a lot of the better decks. So against Pact, against Gruul, against Orzhov Auras, against Jund Food. Phoenix doing poorly against Jund Food. And this is a pretty low confidence interval, this 5 to 62. So this is something I'd want more information on. But for example, my gut says I feel like I'd be surprised if this matchup is this bad, for example. They have metrics and how many of these decks had variables and card choices? No, there's just too many and again, that's the type of thing you want to think about too, is looking at this type of information is it's hard to account for that, right? There's just so many variables. Even if you had a bunch of people playing the same main decks, you have all those sideboard cards as well. But honestly, like I said, especially when you get down to the nitty gritty of some of these lower ones, man, Arcanist had a real bad weekend. That's brutal. It was good versus the Claim the Firstborn deck was good versus Orzhov Auras. Weird. Strange how that works. Yeah, this doesn't surprise me. Yeah, Aura's at 90% versus Simic Stompy with a pretty decent confidence interval here is that doesn't surprise me at all. The Auras, this deck doesn't have any tools that profitably interact with this, and you can't race them efficiently. But yeah, as a whole, I feel like one of the things that I talk about when it comes to card game data is card game data, a lot of the time, because there's so many variables, it's the art of kind of extrapolating statistically insignificant samples to trying to draw meaningful conclusions. And here, a lot of the metrics here kind of line up with what my gut feelings have been about the format. So I don't think you can take these in terms of gospel truth, but they're good if you have someone with some experience evaluating the format and go, okay, Gruul feels like it's reasonable but not overpowered, and about a 50% win rate means, yeah, that's probably the case. And like I said, the fact that all four of these decks had, within 49 to 52% win rates, even looking at the confidence intervals, right? On the high end, these are just barely at 56%. That's a good healthy place to be. A number one sign of an unhealthy format, in my opinion, is when your known best decks continue putting up strong results. So when you have tournaments and the most represented deck is posting 55, 56, 60% win rates, that means that your format does not have tools to adjust to beat the best decks, and something probably needs to change. Yeah, when everybody like knows your public enemy number one and they still can't beat you, that means something needs to be done differently. Sure, and like I said, you know, sample sizes are a thing in this, but like, for example, my experience in the format is that Rakdos Arcanist is just okay or bad. So like this kind of matches what my experience is playing in the format. Now, one thing that does kind of separate out from my experiences, Dimir Rogues has felt very, very strong and obnoxious. And these, while again, we're only at 70 decks here, maybe there's not even, there's likely a good chance that like that deck just feels bad to play against and it's not actually busted. Although I will say here, Dimir Rogues is out here doing the Lord's work at 80% against Gandalf control. So, you know, it's hard to be too upset at the Rogues when they're out here getting to beat up the Gandalfs of the world. They're doing the work you want them to do. Open deck lists are good against Rogues. Is that true? I don't know that that's strictly true. I think open, that's actually another consideration too. That's something I didn't talk about, so I appreciate you bringing that up, is that these win rate metrics, even if you have good confidence intervals, are different for an open deck list setting versus the closed deck list ladder. Yeah. And to show you what I mean by that, I would expect Gruul aggro, Selesnya Company, Auras, Stompy. Yeah, those decks. I expect Gruul, Selesnya, Auras, and Stompy. All of these decks I expect to have better win rates than represented here on the ladder, because aggressive linear decks capable of running you over gain percentage points in game ones because people will keep hands that don't just line up well against them. Whereas, you know, say you're playing Jeskai control and you know your opponent's on Gruul aggro, you mulligan that hand on the draw that's just like memory lapse, absorb, no sweepers or removal, right? So like decks like Jeskai control, combo control, and Pact, Dimir Rogues, Arcanist, I would actually expect this deck to get even worse on the ladder because it's generally speaking an interactive mid-range deck, and decks that are looking to be interactive gain more of an edge in open deck lists because they can mulligan appropriately game one looking for correct hands that work. So yeah, so this was fun. I kind of got rambly here. This might be something we do some consistency if we get decent historic samplings on. Definitely on the weeks where SCG gives us historic tournaments, because we get a decent amount of decks out of that. So I don't know that it'll be every week, but when we get a decent historic matrix photo out of the MTG data, folks, there's the link in chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to link the MTG data matrix I'm looking at right down in the video description. Let's get back to playing some more Magic this morning. But yeah, I think doing something like that, talking about it, and kind of giving some context to the numbers. Because again, like there's a good saying, right, that like data doesn't lie, but liars love data, and it's important to have someone, even multiple someones, give you opinions on like what the metrics mean, because you can tell different things based on different backgrounds, right? There's sample deck lists with those metrics. All of those deck lists can be found at MTG Melee, which is like the best source for deck lists at this point.